Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Behind the Camera TV and Film panel for MAM Fest. My name is Melissa Slaughter. I am one of the producers of MAM Fest, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a mixed race woman with black hair, glasses, tan skin, brown eyes, and I've got a bunch of artwork behind me. I'm sitting here with three of our guests, and we have a fourth guest who will be joining us soon. Can each of you introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Zosimo Maximo, pronouns he, him. I am in Cleveland, Ohio. I am mixed race, brown skin, salt and pepper hair, almond eyes. Behind me is a really cool black and silver wallpaper of speakers, boomboxes, cassettes, and turntables. Glad to be joining you today.
Glad to have you, Zosimo. Leah, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Leah Nanako Winkler. I am calling. I don't know. I'm on from New York, and I'm also mixed race. I'm half Japanese, half white, and in my background is just a bunch of books. I'm wearing glasses.
Hi, I'm Hernando Cortes Watso. I'm a filmmaker. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm joining you from Los Angeles, California. Let's see, I'm mixed race. I'm Haitian and Filipino. I'm gay. I have black hair. I don't know my eyes, brown skin, and behind me is a bamboo thatched wall with, I consider this a map of the world. So I kind of look at the globe every day to be inspired. Yes, and I'm glad to be here.
Hernando, it's a beautiful piece of art behind you.
Cost plus, baby, cost plus.
Ooh, good tip. Well, thank you all for joining me. We're so excited to have you. The first question I have regarding this panel is, when was the first time you saw yourself in media?
I think for me, I grew up in Japan. So I used to see a lot of versions of like half Japanese people on television. I mean, since I was a baby. I think the very first was like a commercial. I mean, like there's all these like different like models who are half Japanese, half white in Japan. I actually was one when I was a kid. I never could be now, but like from ages 2 to 6, I was like a mixed race model, and I was like in like weird segments for variety shows on a catalog magazine called Samantha. But when I moved to America, I remember not seeing anybody at all, except for one episode of the show Boy Meets World, where Lindsay Price, the actress, was playing like a love interest of one of the Corey Matthews' brother.
Eric Matthews. I'm going to look that up immediately after this because I'm a huge Boy Meets World fan, but I don't remember that moment.
Yeah, it's a racism episode. Like she gets like called a racial slur at the mall, and then Corey learns about racism.
Wow.
That's how it was in the 90s.
But that's how impactful it was for me, because I was like, oh my God, a half Asian girl. I still remember like the entire plot.
I think for me, I think it was Steven Spielberg's Hook. I remember seeing Dante Bosco, and my cousins were like, there's a Filipino guy in a movie. This is crazy. Like, you think Julia Roberts, Robert Williams, Justin Hoffman, right? But for us, it was like Dante Bosco. And then people like, his family's lived a few towns over. So there's all this sort of like excitement about seeing it. And he was a hero, which is pretty cool. He was, the leader of the Lost Boys, which is pretty awesome. And so growing up, me and my cousins would recreate scenes for that movie, and it was just, it's just inspiring. But interesting, thematically, I felt myself. I studied theater at UCLA, and in Tennessee Williams' work, Streetcar Named Desire, I saw my family first there, which is interesting. This sort of heightened theatricality of a family, but that was the first time I saw myself visually, but thematically, I saw myself in plays first.
That's a great answer. I love that. Zosimo, what about you?
I'm going to take you guys back a couple decades. I grew up in the 70s. So my first experience of seeing someone Asian on television, they weren't even Asian. right? It was Jerry Lewis and yellow face with his pop glasses and his buck teeth. And
Great.
I remember my dad was a big fan of those Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis movies, and he wasn't laughing. And I wasn't sure what to do either. So, was it funny? Was it not funny? I just remember his reaction, kind of seeing that and all the big laughs he had throughout those movies, except for that one. And then come a little bit later, the next person with Asian representation was David Carradine, who was in Kung Fu, and he wasn't Asian either.
Famously, the role that was meant to be for Bruce Lee.
Exactly. So it wasn't until I started discovering Bruce Lee movies, when I was like a teen, that I actually saw an Asian representing himself.
So with that in mind, you all have such varying backgrounds of the different ways in which you feel like you've seen yourself or you've been seen in media. What was the moment that you realized you wanted to participate in media, whether it was theater, TV, film, even commercials? Hard hitters today. Yes.
Oh, that's hard. I would say, Tim Burton was such a weird inspiration for me as a kid. I just remember I'd never seen sort of like this auteur where everything in a movie was from his mind, which is the concept I'd never understood. That I thought directors just did a job and came in and left. I mean, kind of like TV, but for films, I thought Tim Burton was this sort of like just subversive. I remember seeing Edward Scissorhands and Batman and think, this guy's so dark and edgy and I just love this world. But I think probably the first time I decided to be a filmmaker was probably seeing Batman with Tim Burton. And it was probably with my dad, which we're not very close. So there's an emotional sort of like, we would go to the movies. And so we didn't talk much, but we watched movies. And so that was an escape. And I think obviously psychologically, I know why I was drawn to make movies is because I'm trying to climb back to that moment where I guess it's a childhood thing where I'm trying to solve a piece of the puzzle of how I became who I am. So I think that's the emotional reason. But I think Tim Burton was the first director, along with a lot of other that I saw like, oh, the job is much more complex than just showing up. You can fully realize a world and you could be weird and strange and still be successful. I guess maybe that was kind of the idea too.
Hernando, I read somewhere that you saw that movie when you were 5 years old.
I did. Yeah. I was 5 years old. Almost 5. Yeah.
That's such a wild movie to see as such a young child.
I saw worse. I saw like Clockwork Orange like the year later. And so, I watched hard R movies all my childhood. So it was a very, we had no one cared what we were doing as kids. Like they didn't know, everyone was busy. So no one, the movies were supervision, like just pop on a VHS and leave them alone. So
I watched Blazing Saddles when I was like 11 with my dad for the same reason.
This is the result. This is what happens when you leave kids unchecked.
Is you get to be an artist and you have beautiful work in your house.
Yeah. Well, also you're inspired by different things and you realize that, you can't really live a different life. I don't say it's not simple. It's just different. Not everyone has the same drives that you do and it's okay.
Absolutely. Leah and Zosimo, either one of you?
I think for, as you can see, I'm into music. So I grew up with MTV. And music videos were just a big part of my life, and being able to tell a story visually with 3-4 minutes, and a lot of production. So I started to really hone in on music video directors and seeing that was an actual career and a path, and ended up going to Art Center College to pursue music videos. But, as I was discovering, independent film, it was like the Wong Kar-wais, John Woo's, Kurosawa's and things like that, where I was like, wow, there's really strong Asian filmmakers that are very influential. And that's when I kind of knew like, hey, I think there's a place for me here.
Amazing. Are there any music videos in particular that stood out to you as ones that inspired you that you think others should see?
Oh yeah, I think if you do watch the early Michael Jackson videos, those were productions. your basic music video was 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes, but, they were doing, 10-minute, 15-minute stories and features like Thriller, what was happening before the song starts, what happens at the end of the song. So it was, really true storytelling. But there's, you look at the 80s especially. I mean, we were into everything. So pop culture was, you listen to rock, you listen to R&B, you listen to hip hop. It was all mixed together. So even something as fun as a Aha animated video, was really, really cool. So the genre was huge. It was from short stories you could tell, to just some really good visual representation that you could do too.
Yeah, I don't think we get a lot of the same, except for like Janelle Monáe and Beyonce. I don't think we get a lot of the same video
You don't.
artistry as there was. Leah, what about you?
I think for me, because I was bicultural, in addition to being biracial, I had a really hard time finding like a sense of home. And how I really dealt with that is through writing. And even when I was like in second grade, or like just really, really young, I think the first thing that I said that I wanted to be when I grew up was bus driver. Bus drivers are really cool in Japan. But and then like the second thing I said was writer. So ever since I could remember, I've always wanted to be a writer, because that's just the place that I felt the most calm, the most myself, the most at home, and how I could really just create my own identity and my own blueprint, or how I deal with seminal things that happened in my life. I think as biracial people or mixed culture people, like we don't have a lot of examples. So writing is where I found the most comfortable of like making my own story, making my own narrative. And when I went to America and I started going to school in Kentucky, these issues of identity just really started to amplify, because I was in Japanese school at the same time that I was at American school. And I was already experiencing like the sort of dichotomy of like two like extremely different identities. Like in Japanese school, I was like kind of cool, right? And then in American school, I was like the girl from Japan. And then in Japan, I was like the white girl. So I started kind of going down a negative path of aimlessness until I auditioned for the school play. And I didn't get in, but I was on the tech crew. And I just remember all the lights like going down and being like, oh, I feel like even more at home here. And then I started noticing like, oh, there's no parts for like non-white people in theater. And I didn't really deal with that at my high school, just because I went to a relatively diverse school and all the leads were like all different races. But when I left high school, especially going into a college that I attended, it was like all white. I was a theater major. I was the only person of color, even though I'm half white. And I remember this really seminal thing happening where there was a production of Top Girls. And this is a play that has one Asian part in it. And it's a character named Lady Nijo, and she's supposed to be like this empress of Japan. And they asked me to teach the white girl who was playing this role a Japanese accent, an authentic Japanese accent.
Ooh, I identify with this moment.
Yeah, and I remember doing it, right? This was like 2006 or sorry, like 2003 or like something like that. I remember doing it and just feeling really gross. And after that, I just started making my own plays. I was already writing, but I kind of veered away from that college and started self-producing my own plays in the town where the college was, and then just kind of ditched and went to New York because I sort of lost faith in material that already existed. And I really think that whether that be in television or film or theater, like you really have to create the roles you want to see. If you find yourself like kind of upset about the circumstance, like you can sit there and complain, right? And it's not going to do anything, or you can just kind of be proactive, especially if you like love doing that. So it slowly just became my mission as an artist. Although the first impulse of like, oh, I want to be a writer came from like kind of therapeutic sense of like, where do I belong?
I love this journey of writer to over almost like journaling to playwright to limits creating the limitation of the theater you saw around you, inspiring the creativity that you have now as a playwright going forward. I believe we have our fourth person coming in. If we want to add him now. Maris, hello.
Hello.
Welcome. If you would like to
Thank you.
introduce yourself.
How are you?
My name is Maris Litica. I am Black and Latvian. Latvia is a very small Eastern European country. I am currently in occupied Chumash territory in Los Angeles, and my pronouns are he, him.
Amazing. And you're the founder of the Blended Future Project, correct?
Yes, I am the founder of the Blended Future Project, which is an online media company dedicated to empowering a multiracial experience in what I feel as though will be the upcoming change in demographics in America and probably worldwide. And I'm also very proud to be one of the MAM Lab's mentors.
Thank you so much. If anyone wants to know more about the future of multiracial people in America, the new census has really fascinating data. Just saying.
It does.
Yes.
Does it?
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, it really does.
It's exciting to look at, if I'm honest. Maris, we were just talking about the moment that you realized that media was for you, because you've worked in a variety of different types of media, correct?
Yes. So I have been involved in the entertainment and media industry for over 2 decades now. It really kind of solidified. I lived in Denmark when I was in high school, which is a very long story. But the long and short of it, but the short story is my parents got divorced. My mom moved to a foreign country. She asked me if I wanted to come over a year later. I said yes. And during that time frame, I always wanted to tell stories. First, I wanted to be a writer. Then maybe I wanted to be like a comic book artist. And then I would go to the theater because that was the only way that I had a connection kind of back to the United States. Because I had gone, when you move to a foreign country, your identity shifts from you become like an immigrant, essentially, no matter who you are, what your culture background is, your identity is immigrant. So the only way that I could find a connection to home was to go to the movie theater. And I think it was The Crow, which I thought was a fantastic movie at the time. But that was kind of where I got like, oh, this is how you tell stories and really build an emotional connection to an audience. So I came back to the United States, went to Columbia College, and just started working immediately. And I've worked as a cinematographer, a producer, a director, even a sound mixer. I'm currently a video editor at a company called Kin Community, which makes diverse women's lifestyle content. As a matter of fact, if you Google multiracial on YouTube, TMRA's video about growing up multiracial is the top result that you see, and that's the one that I made. But it was in kind of the shadow of the 2016 election where I noticed that there's a lot of people who are very scared of people of different ethnicities and cultures coming together. But at the same time, I'm watching it happen in real time. So there's like these 2 separate worlds that exist, and how do we deal with the world that is to come, which is you're not going to be able to tell what any category anybody is, but everybody still wants to live in that world where everybody is one category. So that's why I started doing what I do.
Amazing. Bouncing off of that, this is a question for both Maris and Zosimo. You've both started your own media companies, and I'm curious, how do you balance the commercialism side of media and the activism side?
Well, I've been, my career after I graduated Art Center took me to MTV. So I directed, produced several shows for MTV and BET, Spike Television, Style Network. And now this kind of chapter in my life, knowing that I was creating programming kind of for everybody back then, I'm really focused on just the narrative for BIPOC filmmaking. And raising the awareness and the underrepresentation for BIPOC people of color in front of the camera and behind. So Groove Me Media is my latest venture where we're just focused on projects that are telling those authentic stories of people of color by filmmakers of color. So commercialization, obviously we want to make good stuff that people, that all audience can kind of resonate with. But I just really feel it's important in this next chapter of my journey to make sure that, it's either a filmmaker or producer that is behind it, or, talent of color in front of the camera.
Amazing.
I mean, the way that I kind of deal with it is, at the end of the day, filmmaking is a business. It's a very expensive endeavor to do. So people are spending a lot of money and they want to make sure that there's a return on the money that they spend.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the way I deal with it is, and what I preach is, I'm just delivering the audience that you need anyway.
Mm-hmm.
These are the people that you need to, like, I know you have an idea in your head of, what a particular film is supposed to look like. But if you don't have the right people in place who essentially speak the cultural language of the people you're trying to get in front of, which are you're going to be your future customers over the next 2 to 3 decades,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to lose money anyway. So you might as well just, give up a little bit of control and let the people who speak the cultural language make it, because then it will actually resonate with the people you're trying to reach. Otherwise, and I think they did studies that most people of color don't feel that media represents them accurately, because it's based on tropes and stereotypes, and there isn't anybody in the room who actually knows the cultural language of what they're trying to make. So if you just, that's how I balance it, is I'm just putting in place people who speak the cultural language, so that way there's no pressure on you, and you'll be able to connect with the audience that you're trying to reach anyway.
I love that, especially so often you hear people say, oh, we just couldn't find the person to work on this. We couldn't find the right person of color who's also a director, who's also an actor, whatever it is. And so you're kind of taking that extra step and saying, they're all here. All you have to do is call me.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to switch a little bit to Hernando. I
Yes.
was checking out your IMDb and I was looking at all of
no.
your credits. But you've worked on a variety of things. You've
Yeah.
done so much. And you've also got a really fascinating balance of having worked on your own projects and having worked on other people's projects. Namely, I'm
Yes.
thinking of Ryan Murphy's Hollywood and the upcoming American Crime Story, correct?
I worked
Impeachment?
on, I didn't work on impeachment. I worked on People for O.J. Simpson and Assassination of Gianni Versace.
Which was incredible and features a Hapa lead.
And exactly. And also, it's also interesting to jump in between huge worlds and small things. I always have to flex a muscle. When I first got out of college, I worked on, my first job was World Trade Center. I was a set PA for Oliver Stone's movie. I was living in New York City, and I just saw this huge, $70 million machine. And all I was doing, what I was thinking, by just being on set and working, was also just kind of learning and absorbing. I was obsessed with how people do anything and how they operate, right? That's, to me, I'm always sort of educating myself in every day. I'm trying to learn and grow and be better in every possible way. So, once I got to USC, I went to USC for film school. And once I got out, I immediately, my first job was People vs. O.J. Simpson. And so it was kind of a huge window into television. And I never truly, I was like, independent film, I want to be a Sundance director. My dream was that was like the big dream. But when I got to TV, I was like, wow, you can actually tell a long form story, and you can talk about how we live today, and it could be on television within 9 months, which is pretty remarkable. Because if you write when I'm thinking about writing features and I'm working on right now, it's like the themes have to be almost timeless. They have to be something that could come out in 5 years or 10 years or wherever it gets financed. And so TV is something that I find so, it's the future in my mind, because it's so you can, and I didn't realize that up until this last cycle of globalism and violence and insanity that we've been in, that I was a political artist. I'd never considered myself, this is what I want to talk about, these themes, but it's impossible for me not to look into the world and say, how can I distill all that and make something entertaining? My goal is I'm always constantly thinking about the audience, which I never did before until television, because you're constantly realizing that the world is, I don't like to be didactic or dumbed down or think about I'm trying to run away from cliche. I really am, because I see everything and I'm watching everything, and the things that stand out to me are the things that are running away from the things we've dealt with before. So, the things that stand out, like I May Destroy You, right, or a show like
Incredible.
that. So the path of its writing is like amazeballs. It's like, wow, I'm looking. You want to aspire to something great like that. So, television to me is a way that I can talk about how we live in a way that that is more palatable, and also that's digestible, but also it could be so exciting. I don't know. I'm a kid. I'm still like excited by a pilot or a story, and sort of taking in an audience in a different way. And I think I consider that my time working on all the shows for Ryan, it was just education. It was like, absorbing all this more and more. I feel like I got my PhD, and
Absolutely.
but now I feel like I have to take charge of my own stories and reflect people who look like me, and people who have past like me, and people who are mixed race and have complicated past. And I think that once storytelling for people of color transcends cliche and enters in a complex level, like Tony Soprano, we're finally seeing Breaking Bad of that level. I think that's the next evolution of storytelling people are craving. I don't think they don't want to see David Carradine, right? That's what they want to see, Bruce Lee, and him being messy and complicated and fucked up, and have the ability to be that person and be a human being. I think that's what we're all craving. We want to see human beings that look like us, that make mistakes, that don't know the answers, and the race is not even a factor. That's the next step. And so I feel like I'm trying to do that in all the work I do, and I didn't want to, and that wasn't my goal. It just happened. And
it just found you.
And I'd be a fool not to talk about how we're living. And if that's my job, I really I go back to my theater thinking, like the dramatist. Like, what does a dramatist do? He simply tells the truth about how we live and why. And that sounds so easy and pat, but it's very complicated to reflect human beings on the screen. Very complicated. And people can smell bullshit right away. They know when it's not real. They know it's not fake. People know when a performance isn't real or a line sounds cheesy. They know it because we're all conditioned. We've seen everything, right? We've seen so many movies and television shows. So I think that is, I'm trying to lead the charge and being just sort of being out of the center of what are expected of people of color.
I love that. And for folks who haven't seen I May Destroy You, like an incredible TV show, absolutely recommend. And I agree. I honestly prefer television to film. I know this is both TV and film panel, but I love the long form versions of TV. And even if it's like a mini series, I think that you can get so much out of it, and there's so much depth. Leah, you've also worked on theater and you've worked on television shows. Can you tell me what your jump to TV was like and what your relationship with TV shows is like?
Yeah, I love staffing. I mean, I feel like I was trying to do both for a pretty long time. I started out, there's a lot of like late night shows that tape in New York. And while I was really like, but before I had gotten someone else to produce my plays in New York, I had gotten a manager through like a short play that I had put up, and I started off like doing like packets for late night and like making like doing joke packets and stuff like that. And it took me a really long time though to like actually get hired on anything. It took it really took until I started becoming more successful as a playwright that Hollywood took interest in me. And then once they did, it was just like, oh, come work on this show, come work on that show, let me option your play. Like, it was just like very like, I was like, oh, okay, I totally understand like what people mean when like they say like once one door opens, it's like easier. But now, I love doing both a lot. Like, I think for theater, it's more mine. Like, I feel like, oh, this is 100% I'm the boss. Nobody does theater for money, right? And I can write whatever I want in any format that I want. I can break any rule that I want. And when I'm staffing on the show, your job essentially is to make a really solid first draft to the showrunner and whoever created the show. and also to like provide your experiences in the room, or not to be like an asshole in the room and like pitch ideas and like be like a good team player. It's more like ensemble work. And I really like that aspect of television a lot. I really love being on set. It's just I just really like doing both things, but they're completely different muscles to work. Even writing theater is like completely different than writing film or television. Like film, I feel like is a little bit more closer to writing a play, but in television, it's just like, I mean, being a writer in TV, like it's not like you're a playwright and you can make all the decisions. Like you write what you all decide to write in the room together, and then you change whatever your boss tells you to change. So it's just like, I mean, unless you're like a bad staff member, but like I think because you know, like you've been in like some rooms where it's just like people refuse to do stuff and it's like never good. But like I think they're both very different mediums that I get different things out of.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you got an agent. Zosimo, you mentioned that you started working at MTV right out of school. I'm curious for folks who are just starting out in the industry, what other ways there are to get started? Is it being a PA like Hernando did, or is it making your own work and then going on from there? Like, what would you suggest for folks who are trying to break into this industry?
Yeah,
and anyone can take this. Mm-hmm.
Back when I came out of school, you needed definitely a good reel, whether you're going to commercials or music videos or, a short film if you're trying to get into theatrical. But I think now that has changed because there's self-distribution with platforms like Film Hub. If you can get into the festivals, I know somebody that just does, the 72-hour shorts and does quite well and gets writing jobs from it. So and he spends literally nothing on those productions. It's just time and effort. But yeah, I would, if I were to do it again, I did love film school. I did not like the cost of film school, but I would have probably taken some of that money and just gone into making my own projects. And I'm up for a Crackle Plus job in New York right now that's just shot over 6 days, 6 episodes. So to even have something like that on your reel nowadays to, put something on YouTube or a digital platform that's probably half the cost of a short film. Issa Rae is a great example of that and what
Yes.
she was able to do with her show and just build a YouTube audience. And then there's people are trying to figure out how to use a camera phone and TikTok to become an influencer to launch their careers that, we're obviously seeing someone like Bella Poarch move into media and huge numbers with her music videos, just the 2 that she's done. She only got on TikTok a little over a year ago. And it's pretty incredible what has been achieved again with a cell phone, time, good algorithms and however, it has taken off for her to get into bigger media now. So I just think the traditional way, and again, when I got out, you had the reel, you sat by the phone, you waited for your agents to call to get any work. I think it's just a very much more proactive DIY approach because there's just distribution where you don't even need an agent or a manager anymore.
The gatekeeping has been removed a little bit. You can just put it out on YouTube. I mean, I think that's why like Wong Fu Productions has done so extremely well on YouTube is the gatekeeping was down and they were able to really fill a niche. Anyone else have advice on how to get started?
I can definitely talk about this. And it's kind of what we do at Kin is kind of that on a massive scale, but essentially it just comes down to you need an audience. You need to have an audience online that you not only communicate with, but that you solve their problem. Like you have a particular area of expertise that you can then just create lots of content to solving that particular problem. And then you can either monetize that problem yourself, or you can go out, and what is actually happening now with the company that I work for is that larger companies will see that you have this audience and that you solve this particular problem, and then they will basically purchase it from you or just bargain with you to help them create more things in a particular niche that they don't have the time or the resources to solve. So yeah, definitely you need to start, making your own stuff if that is the area that you want to go into, but you also have to be open with who you are and why it's important that people watch it. So I think a lot of us, we came up thinking, you make a film, you put it into a film festival, somebody sees it, discovers you, and then dumps a boatload of money at your lap and says, I am now your mentor and I will support you throughout your entire career. But now you definitely have to keep making your own work, but also you kind of have to become your own PR/marketing agency where you say, I made this is why it's important. Go watch it and I will help you solve this issue that you're having.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that speaks to the gatekeeping issue, where gatekeeping has been removed, but in exchange now you have to take on more roles. You have to be able to do so much more in order to be heard amongst all the noise that is online.
Right. But it gives you more autonomy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to speak to that more?
Well, I was like, it's so funny when you brought up, like, I sort of, after USC, I made a little indie feature. It was $70,000. I donated my body to science to start the ball rolling.
How did you do that?
I took a bladder medication in a hospital in Glendale, and for 2 weeks I made $13K and got the pre-pro going. And I was reading Rebel Without a Cause. It was very cliche. I was in the hospital reading Rebel Without a Cause, like studying, like, gonna do it. And the movie came out well and we got well received, but then it was like, then what? And then it came and opened, and I did get reps from it. But I think I was following the old traditional way because I was at the tail end of my inspiration. Like, oh, this is how the guys in the 90s did. This is how Tarantino, that's how you got it rolling. But I think what Zosimo and Maris were saying is, like, it has to be now. It's a new age. And so you literally have to keep creating, and all content is competition, no matter who you are these days, which is kind of fascinating. It's like the big guys are competing with TikTok, which is so, it's completely interesting to me. And you have to pivot, right? It's like, if you don't adapt, you die. And so you really have to sort of learn the new world. But I think that the idea that you have to serve your niche or serve your audience is probably the best inspiration. And listen, I'm not a big Tyler Perry fan, but he found his people, delivered to them time and time again, and everyone kept calling, because when the dollars started rolling in, everyone noticed, and then they started finding him. So I think once you identify who you're speaking to, maybe that's the hardest step that you take,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That makes me think about kind of going back to the original idea of identity. And we've kind of talked about it a little bit. It's come up naturally. Obviously, we're a mixed race panel. Like, it's going to come up and anyone can answer this, but for any of y'all who have come to terms with identity, or, who wrestle with it within your work, how important is it, do you think, to either lead with identity or to have it be integral to your work? Or is it something that is just so personal that it is an individual artist's choice how much they want to grapple with it in their own work? I've said work like 4 times.
I think just for the nature of what I've started getting into, it's very important for me, because I've kind of come to this place where I feel like the work that I create is no longer for me, but it's for people who are still wrestling with these issues, but they don't see anything of themselves in what's out there. So I've kind of taken up the mantle to be that representation, so to speak. But I also think, it has to be done in like a realistic and nuanced way, because nobody gets up in the morning and says, I don't get up in the morning and say, I'm going to be the best mixed person I'm going to be. I wake up and I say, this is what I have to do. I'm Mars. I'm who I am as a human being. But all of the things with identity sort of come into play on a subconscious level. So if you can create something that sort of speaks to that subconscious while still presenting a human, then that speaks more volumes. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of mass media makes, is that either it's not talked about at all, or it's like the focus of the plot and all the conversations. And that's just not how we live our lives. We live our lives where we're running around as people, and then we're just reminded about these things of identity and like societal hierarchies as we're going about. It's not the main focus of our everyday existence. And that's kind of what I try to do.
I love that. Anyone else?
I'm ready to walk into the studios with a Manny Pacquiao shirt on. I'm flying, I'm flying the flag. So, I started a collective that Hernando is a part of called AAPI Creatives, and we're targeting studios to see if they can help us as not emerging. We're not emerging filmmakers anymore. We're deserving. Many of us has gone through the diversity program. So we need jobs, we need work, we need executives of color to be in positions that can help greenlight stuff. So we've been approaching people like Braun Studios and Macro and people like that to kind of help with that initiative. But Hernando, myself, Diane Paragas, who just did Yellow Rose.
Yes, an exceptional film with Eva Noblezada, a mixed lead.
Yeah. So we're the 3 Filipinos within our collective of 12. But as Hernando is saying, and with my work and Diane's work, we're very focused on trying to show Filipinos or put them in lead roles where they're just living everyday life. Like Hernando said, messy, getting into situations, out of situations without throwing a karate kick, without, being the doctor or the math nerd. So, it's a big fight, but, I'm so happy to have met Diane and Hernando because, they are Filipino filmmakers that have that same mission that I do, to kind of really start to wear that flag a lot prouder and to see if we can get some stuff made.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hernando.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that it's like you don't want to lead a charge. You don't want to. I don't, trust me.
It's so exhausting.
It's exhausting. I just would, I want to watch movies and read books. I'm such a nerd. But like when you feel that you have to, because you feel this cultural shift and you have the energy, and honestly, you have this personal ambition where what Maris was saying is like, I took my ego out of it. And I think about the people when I was younger, what they would like to, I want to excite the younger version of me. Maybe that is ego. I don't know. But like, I want to order the people who look like me, right? And represent them in a way that is challenging and not cliche. Like, again, it's hard to fall into those traps, but I think there is something. And also I think what you're talking about society, there is a moral panic, right? Where people feel like, well, the people in charge feel like they have to cater to audiences now because it's in, as opposed to not the right thing, but it feels like they should. So it almost feels like how
performative,
or we all know the what's our favorite like just calling out different races to pat themselves in the back, which is kind of like, I don't want that either. And the
tokenism is unnecessary. We're going beyond that.
And being othered to death. And so I think once we can transcend those blocks, I think we're in a great place. And I think that, look at the census, that's the evolution. The world is getting browner and darker and more mixed. And you're going to miss this ride if you're not part of that. And so again, that's the battle we got to fight.
Amazing. Leah, did you want to close us out on this?
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of like identity and writing and work, I feel 2 ways about it. One is like, you always want to tell a good story. Like identity isn't like enough of a story on its own. Like you can't just be like, oh, what's your log line? It's I'm half Japanese, period.
Right. That's that tokenism that Hernando just mentioned.
Right. I think that like, you always want to be like, oh, how do I tell the story about, being mixed race, and what's the story behind it that is like a compelling film or like a compelling play. So if I have a story that like supports that, then I 100% want to tell that story. Like I have like a film that I'm writing right now based on one of my plays is like about a half Asian girl who decides to dump her perfect white boyfriend in pursuit of a hot Asian doctor husband after her Japanese mother dies. So like that's like about like like losing your culture and grief. But then I think the other part that I care about is like if I'm on a show or something, a TV show, and I think a lot of power is in casting. So I'm always like trying to pitch names who are AAPI, or if it's like for me, like nuance is getting really important as the world becomes more segregated and more antiquated. I do feel like in terms of like mixed race people, we do have a responsibility to be like, hey, like don't talk about us. Like don't talk about us like you know who we are. I've noticed that like we're really hated. I noticed that when Olivia Rodrigo especially like came to rise, like everybody was just like, well, she's white passing, so like that's why she got famous, and like people are just talking about her face and not her music, and it's just kind of like, well, you have to then that tells me that like, yeah, like if we are like rising in the census, which I haven't looked at, so like I don't really know what I'm talking about regarding the census.
It's exciting. Check
what
it
you
out.
said. Okay, but I guess that our numbers are rising probably, right? So it's just like we have to keep telling our stories so that people actually like understand who we are and we don't continue to get dismissed and our narrative doesn't get told for us. So for me right now, like I'm very interested in like nuancing identities as opposed to these like black and white buckets, like Asian, white, like it's like, okay, like what does mixed race actually really mean? But doing that through casting and doing that through story that isn't just about, hey, like I work at a coffee shop and I'm half Japanese, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think we've hit upon a lot of different nuances actually within this conversation, different ways to approach media, to tell stories, to get into the industry, to tell someone else's stories, to tell your own stories, and different ways to take agency over your own identity within the way that you present yourself and present your stories. I hope that all made sense. I'm just gonna ask one last question before we wrap, and this can be a quick one. If you can just in one sentence, tell me one TV or film that TV show or film that you've been watching lately that you want that you're excited about.
The Chair. I just started
Sandra
watching
Oh.
The Chair. Yes, it is very good.
It's very good. Reservoir Dogs.
Reservation Dogs.
Yeah, it's
produced by Taika Waititi. Also,
yeah,
mixed.
it's a great coming of age story and messy and complicated and really funny.
Leah, Zosimo?
I just banged through like 3 seasons of Snowfall on FX, and why I bring that up is because the diversity of their directing roster has been pretty amazing. A lot of directors of color have been given an opportunity to to helm those episodes.
Amazing. And Leah?
90 Day Fiance, because you need a break.
Yes. All right. Before we let you go, just thank you again so much for doing this. I've learned so much. That last question was mostly for me. What shows should I be watching? 90 Day Fiance. Let the people know where they can find you and your work, starting with Morris.
You can, of course, go to our website, blendedfutureproject.com. You can follow me on Instagram at blendedfutureproject, or you can email me personally, which is Morris, MARIS, at blendedfutureproject.com.
Great. Hernando?
You can find me on Instagram at Hernando Cortes Watson, and my email is cortes.watson@gmail.com.
Amazing. Leah?
You can follow me on Twitter at Leah Nanako.
And Zosimo?
Instagram at Zosimo Maximo, and Groove Me Media. That's groovememedia.com.
Great. I will be following all of you right after this. Again, thank you so much for your time. I've learned so much. I hope that the folks watching have learned a lot as well. I'm sure they have. And thank you again for joining us at MAM Fest. Have a great rest of your day, y'all.
Thank you, Melissa. That was excellent.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yep.